The fluorescent lights in Dr. Martinez's office buzzed with that particular frequency that seemed to burrow straight into Maya Chen's skull. She sat on the examination table, her 19-year-old frame hunched forward in a posture that had become as natural as breathing, shoulders curved inward like parentheses protecting something fragile inside her chest. The paper beneath her crinkled with each slight movement, a sound that might as well have been thunder in the sterile quiet. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "I need you to straighten up for me, Maya," Dr. Martinez said, her voice carrying that professional gentleness that healthcare workers perfected over years of delivering both hope and heartbreak. "I know it hurts, but I need to see your full range of motion." Maya's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white against her olive skin. The simple request felt impossible. For 3 months now, standing straight had been like trying to bend a steel rod with her bare hands. Every morning, she woke to the same grinding ache that seemed to live between her shoulder blades, a constant companion that whispered reminders of that afternoon in March when everything changed. "I'm trying," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the medical equipment. She attempted to pull her shoulders back, and immediately a sharp pain shot down her spine like lightning finding its path to ground. Her breath hitched, and she automatically curled forward again, seeking the only position that offered any relief. Dr. Martinez moved behind her, and Maya could feel the chiropractor's presence like warmth from a fire. "Has anyone else examined you since the injury? Your family doctor? A specialist?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Maya's fingers found the small silver bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her grandmother before she passed last year. The metal was smooth and warm from constant touching, her own worry stone in a world that seemed determined to grind her down to nothing. "My mom says doctors just want to make money off people," Maya replied, the words coming out automatically. She'd repeated this phrase so many times over the past months that it felt like a prayer, though one that brought no comfort. "She says I'm being dramatic, that I need to stay strong and stop acting like a victim." Dr. Martinez's hands paused on Maya's shoulders. In that moment of stillness, Maya could hear her own heartbeat, rapid and irregular, the rhythm of someone perpetually braced for impact. The office smelled of antiseptic and something else, lavender maybe, from a small diffuser on the counter that seemed wildly out of place in this clinical environment. "Maya," Dr. Martinez said, moving to face her patient, "can you tell me exactly how this injury happened?" The question was simple enough, but it opened a chasm in Maya's chest. She stared at her hands, noting how her nail polish, a deep purple she'd applied 3 weeks ago, was chipped and peeling. Her mother had criticized that color choice too. "Too dark," she said. "Makes you look like you're going to a funeral." "I fell down the stairs," Maya said, the lie sliding off her tongue with practice ease. But even as she spoke the words, Maya could feel the weight of Dr. Martinez's gaze, steady and knowing. This chiropractor had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the sort of eyes that seemed to see beyond surfaces. She had noticed them immediately during her first visit 2 weeks ago, when desperation had finally driven her to make an appointment against her mother's wishes. "The stairs in your house, are they carpeted?" Dr. Martinez asked, making a note on her tablet. "Hardwood," Maya replied quickly, then added, "They're really steep. Old house." Another note. Maya watched Dr. Martinez's fingers move across the screen, each tap somehow ominous. The chiropractor wore a simple wedding ring and a watch that looked like it had seen decades of use. Everything about her seemed solid, dependable, qualities that Maya had learned not to trust too readily. "And you landed on your back when you fell." "You enjoy this," she observed, not really a question. Miguel glanced up from the engine compartment, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. "I do. There's something honest about mechanical problems. They don't lie or make excuses or pretend to be something they're not. You diagnose the issue, you fix it, and either it works or it doesn't. Simple." "Unlike people," Catherine said with a smile that seemed to carry stories. "Unlike people," Miguel agreed. As he reconnected the final wire, Miguel found himself talking in a way he rarely did with customers, sharing the dreams he usually kept locked away like precious secrets. He told Catherine about his vision for Santo's custom restoration, about the classic cars that deserved better than the scrapyard, about the artistry involved in bringing automotive history back to life. His words came out in a rush, as if they'd been dammed up for too long, and finally found a crack in the wall of his usual reserve. Catherine listened with the kind of attention that made Miguel feel heard. Really heard. Perhaps for the first time in years. She asked about his background, about his training, about the business plan that sat collecting dust in his desk drawer. And when Miguel mentioned his father, the way his voice softened with love and loss, Catherine's expression grew thoughtful in a way that suggested she understood the weight of legacy and the burden of carrying forward someone else's dreams along with your own. "There," Miguel said finally, closing the hood with satisfaction. "She should run like new. The alternator I installed is actually more reliable than the original. Sometimes the aftermarket parts are built better than what comes from the factory." Catherine slid behind the wheel, and the Mercedes came to life with the smooth purr of German engineering at its finest. The dashboard remained dark, no warning lights, no signs of distress. Miguel had performed his small miracle, bringing order back to chaos, function back to failure. "How much do I owe you?" Catherine asked, reaching for a purse that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Miguel calculated parts and labor, adding his standard markup, but nothing more despite the obvious wealth of his customer. $240, he said. Catherine handed him $300 bills without hesitation. "Keep the change, and thank you, not just for the repair, but for the conversation. It's rare to meet someone who talks about their work with such passion." As she prepared to leave, Catherine paused, her hand on the door handle. "Miguel, this business plan of yours, this Santos custom restoration, do you have it written down?" Miguel nodded, wondering where this was leading. Every detail, market analysis, financial projections, equipment needs, target customer base. I've been working on it for 3 years. "And you need funding to make it happen?" $50,000 would cover everything. Equipment, initial inventory, shop improvements, operating capital for the first 6 months. The words tumbled out before Miguel could stop them, and he immediately felt foolish. Why was he telling a stranger his financial needs? Catherine smiled, an expression that seemed to hold secrets and possibilities. "Well, Miguel Santos, I have a feeling we might be speaking again very soon. Thank you for restoring my faith in honest mechanics and in the American dream." She drove away into the storm, the Mercedes disappearing into the gray afternoon like a silver ghost, leaving Miguel standing in the doorway of his humble shop with $300 in his hand and a strange sense that something significant had just occurred. He didn't know it yet, but the woman who'd walked into his life seeking automotive help was Catherine Pinnacle, president and CEO of Pinnacle National Bank, the same bank where his loan application waited like a sleeping dragon that could either grant his wishes or incinerate his dreams. The rain continued to fall, but for the first time in weeks, Miguel Santos allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the storm was finally beginning to pass. The $300 helped with immediate bills, but Miguel was soon back to his familiar financial struggles. Sophia's homework lay scattered across the kitchen table of their small apartment above the shop, math problems that seemed to mock him with their clean certainty. Numbers that added up perfectly, unlike the chaotic arithmetic of his life where expenses always exceeded income, where dreams cost more than reality could afford. His 12-year-old daughter worked with the focused intensity she'd inherited from him, her dark hair falling across her face as she bent over equations that had clear solutions, unlike the problems that kept her father awake at night. "Papa, can you help me with this one?" Sophia asked, pointing to a word problem about compound interest that made Miguel's chest tighten. The irony wasn't lost on him. His daughter learning about how money could grow while he struggled to keep any money from disappearing entirely. Miguel slid into the chair beside her, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo, a small luxury he refused to sacrifice, even when the bills mounted higher than his hope. Let's see, if someone invests $500 at 6% interest compounded annually, he worked through the problem with her, showing her how money could multiply over time,
how patience and consistency could build wealth from modest beginnings. The lesson felt like swallowing glass. After Sophia went to bed, Miguel sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by the familiar constellation of unpaid bills and rejection letters from various lenders. Each, "We regret to inform you," felt like a small death, another dream deferred until it withered from neglect. The folder containing his business plan sat before him like an accusation. 3 years of research and hope reduced to paper that might as well have been tissue for all the good it had done him. He opened the folder anyway, running his fingers over the pages he'd memorized by heart. The market analysis showed a growing demand for classic car restoration among affluent collectors. The financial projections were conservative but promising, based on research into similar businesses across the country. He'd identified his target market, calculated his overhead, projected his growth trajectory. Everything was there except the one thing that mattered most: $50,000 to make it real. Miguel's phone buzzed with a text from his sister Maria. "How's the loan application going? Any word from the bank?" He typed back, "Still waiting to hear. These things take time." The lie came easily, but it sat heavy in his stomach, alongside the instant ramen that had become his dinner more nights than he cared to admit. The next morning brought Mrs. Chen, whose ancient Buick needed more work than it was worth, and Tommy Rodriguez, whose pickup truck required creative parts sourcing since the original manufacturer had gone out of business during the Clinton administration. Miguel worked with the methodical patience his father had taught him, taking pride in solving problems that other shops would have declared hopeless. But pride didn't pay the rent, and satisfaction didn't fill empty stomachs. During his lunch break, a bologna sandwich and coffee that could have been used to degrease engines, Miguel walked to the library and used their computer to research Pinnacle National Bank. Catherine's face smiled at him from the website's leadership page, and he nearly choked on his sandwich. Catherine Pinnacle, president and CEO, Harvard MBA, 30 years in banking, known for her innovative approaches to small business lending. The woman whose Mercedes he'd repaired, whose conversation had made him feel heard and valued, was the same person who would ultimately decide the fate of his loan application. Instantly, his hope sank back to its familiar depths.
"I'm sorry, Mom," Maya called back, kicking off her shoes and arranging them neatly beside Linda's practical black flats. The appointment ran long. She found Linda in the kitchen, standing at the stove with her back rigid and her dark hair pulled into the same severe bun she'd worn for as long as Maya could remember. At 48, Linda Chen was still striking. High cheekbones and almond-shaped eyes that could convey disapproval with surgical precision. She wore a navy blue blouse tucked into pressed khaki pants, the uniform of someone who treated casual clothing as a moral failing. "What did the doctor say?" Linda asked, without turning around. She was stirring something in a pot with mechanical consistency, the wooden spoon making soft scraping sounds against the metal. Maya moved to the refrigerator and poured herself a glass of water, buying time to construct her response. The kitchen was small but efficient, with pale yellow walls that Linda had painted herself 3 years ago. Maya remembered helping with that project. Remembered the rare moment of collaboration when they'd worked side by side, listening to oldies radio and actually laughing together. "She said I need more treatment," Maya replied carefully. "Physical therapy, probably. Maybe some more imaging." Linda's stirring stopped. "More appointments? Maya, this has gone on long enough. You fell down some stairs. People do it every day without making such a production." Maya sat down at the small dinette table, its surface covered with a plastic tablecloth printed with sunflowers. Linda had always favored cheerful patterns that clashed with the careful coldness of her personality. Maya had never understood the disconnect between her mother's aesthetic choices and her emotional presentation, as if Linda were trying to convince herself that happiness was something you could purchase at the home goods store. "It's not that simple, Mom," Maya said, immediately regretting the words. Contradicting Linda's assessments was always dangerous territory.
Linda turned from the stove, her expression already hardening. Not that simple. Maya, you're 19 years old. When I was your age, I was working 2 jobs and taking care of my sick mother. I didn't have time to run to doctors every time something hurt. Maya had heard this story countless times. Linda's difficult childhood, her absent father, her mother's long battle with emphysema. These stories were weapons in Linda's arsenal, deployed whenever Maya showed signs of what Linda considered weakness or self-pity. Maya had learned to receive them in silence, to nod appropriately and absorb the implied criticism. "I know you worked hard," Maya said quietly. "I'm not trying to be dramatic." "Then stop going to doctors who just want to take our money," Linda snapped. She ladled rice and vegetables onto 2 plates with sharp, efficient movements. Maya accepted her plate of food, noting that Linda had prepared her favorite stir-fry, snow peas and carrots with ginger served over jasmine rice. These small kindnesses always confused Maya, moments of apparent care that existed alongside the constant criticism and control. It was like living with 2 different people, never knowing which one would greet her at any given moment. They ate in relative silence, the television providing background noise from the living room. Maya chewed carefully, her appetite dulled by anxiety. Every few minutes she could feel Linda watching her, assessing her mood, her posture, her level of compliance. Maya had become an expert at reading these evaluations, adjusting her behavior in real time to avoid triggering Linda's anger. "How was work today?" Maya asked, hoping to redirect the conversation to safer territory. Linda worked as an administrative assistant at a dental office downtown, a job she'd held for 12 years despite constantly complaining about her coworkers and the dentist she served. She had strong opinions about everyone in that office, detailed critiques of their professional and personal choices that she shared with Maya in exhaustive detail.
Dr. Peterson is an idiot, Linda said, launching into a familiar narrative about mismanaged schedules and incompetent colleagues. And that new hygienist thinks she knows everything because she went to some fancy school. I've been working in dental offices since before she was born. Maya nodded at appropriate intervals, making supportive sounds while her mind wandered. She thought about Dr. Martinez's kind eyes, the way the chiropractor had looked at her x-rays with genuine concern rather than dismissal. She thought about the crisis line card hidden in her purse, about the phone call that would come tomorrow or the next day. "Are you even listening to me?" Linda's sharp voice cut through Maya's distraction. "Yes, of course," Maya said quickly. "You were talking about the new hygienist." Linda's eyes narrowed slightly, and Maya braced herself for the interrogation that usually followed any perceived inattention. But instead, Linda simply resumed eating, her silence somehow more ominous than her complaints. After dinner, Maya volunteered to wash the dishes, standing at the sink while Linda settled into her recliner in the living room. The routine was familiar and oddly comforting. The warm water on her hands, the simple task of cleaning plates and glasses, the temporary peace that came with meeting Linda's expectations. But as Maya scrubbed the pot Linda had used for the stir-fry, she found herself thinking about Dr. Martinez's words. "You are not responsible for managing her emotions or protecting her from the consequences of her actions." The concept felt radical, almost incomprehensible. Maya's entire life had been organized around managing Linda's emotions, predicting her moods, avoiding the triggers that can transform a quiet evening into hours of criticism and anger. Maya had become an expert meteorologist of her mother's temperament, reading atmospheric pressure in the set of Linda's shoulders, the tone of her voice, the rhythm of her footsteps across the apartment floor. "Maya?" Linda called from the living room. "Come here for a minute." Maya dried her hands and walked to where Linda sat watching the news. The living room was Linda's domain, furnished with pieces she'd saved for years to afford. A burgundy leather sofa, a glass coffee table, matching end tables with ceramic lamps. Everything was positioned for optimal television viewing, the entire room oriented toward the large flat screen that Linda had bought herself for Christmas 2 years ago. "Sit down," Linda said, patting the sofa beside her chair. Maya perched on the edge of the cushion, her back protesting the awkward position.
On the screen, a reporter was discussing a local house fire, but Maya could tell that wasn't why Linda had called her over. There was something in her mother's posture, a particular tension that Maya had learned to recognize. "I've been thinking about your future," Linda said, her gaze still fixed on the television. "About what you're going to do with your life." Maya's stomach clenched. They hadn't discussed the college acceptance since the day of the injury, and Maya had been hoping Linda had forgotten about it entirely. The scholarship letter was still hidden in Maya's desk drawer, along with all the enrollment materials she'd been too afraid to complete. "I've decided you should look into the community college," Linda continued. "You could study something practical, medical billing maybe, or administrative assistance, something that would let you stay close to home." "Mom," Maya began carefully, "remember the scholarship I mentioned to State University?" Linda's expression hardened, and Maya immediately regretted bringing it up. But something about Dr. Martinez's words, about not being responsible for managing Linda's emotions, gave her the courage to continue. "It's a full ride," Maya said. "Engineering program. I could graduate without any debt." "Engineering," Linda repeated, her voice flat. "Maya, you barely passed calculus in high school. You think you're going to become some kind of engineer?"
The words stung, partly because Maya had struggled with calculus, had spent countless late nights at the kitchen table trying to understand concepts that seemed to elude her. But she'd also spent those same nights dreaming of a future where she could design bridges or buildings, where she could create something lasting and important. "I could try," Maya said quietly. "The scholarship committee obviously thinks I can do it." Linda turned to look at her directly, and Maya saw something dangerous flickering in her mother's eyes. "Maya, I need you here. I've sacrificed everything for you, worked myself to death to keep this roof over our heads, and now you want to abandon me for some fantasy about being an engineer?" "It's not abandoning you," protested Maya, though even as she said it, she knew Linda would interpret any form of independence as betrayal. "I could come home on weekends, holidays, and after I graduate, I could get a good job, help you more." "Help me more?" Linda's voice rose slightly. "Maya, you don't help me at all now. You eat my food, use my electricity, sleep under my roof, and contribute nothing. And now you think you're going to leave me here alone while you go play college student?" Maya felt the familiar shame burning in her chest, the crushing weight of obligations she'd never asked for but somehow owed. Linda had worked hard, had sacrificed to raise Maya alone. These were facts Maya couldn't dispute, even when they were wielded like weapons. "I'm sorry," Maya said automatically. "I didn't mean it that way." "No, you never mean anything the way it sounds," Linda said bitterly. "But your actions speak louder than your apologies, Maya. You're selfish, just like your father." Maya flinched. Comparisons to her absent father were Linda's nuclear option, reserved for moments when she really wanted to inflict damage. Maya only had vague memories of her father, a tall man with kind eyes who used to read her bedtime stories. But Linda had spent years systematically destroying those memories, replacing them with narratives of abandonment and betrayal. "I'm not like him," Maya said, her voice barely audible. "Aren't you?" Linda stood up from her recliner, beginning to pace the small living room. "He made promises too. Said he loved us, said he'd take care of us. Then the minute things got difficult, he disappeared." Maya had heard this story so many times she could recite it from memory. Her father, overwhelmed by the responsibilities of parenthood, had simply vanished one day when Maya was 4. No explanation, no goodbye, no contact since. Linda had been left to raise a young child alone, working multiple jobs, struggling to make ends meet. But lately, Maya had begun to wonder about the parts of the story Linda never told. Had her father really left without reason? Had there been arguments, incidents, patterns of behavior that drove him away? Maya had no way to find out. Linda had destroyed all photos of him, thrown away anything that might have connected Maya to his memory. "Mom," said carefully,
What if I could go to school and still help you? What if you stopped being such a dreamer and faced reality? You're not college material, Maya. You're barely managing your responsibilities here at home. Maya felt something crack inside her chest, a small fissure in the foundation of assumptions she'd built her life on. For years, Maya had accepted Linda's assessments of her abilities, her character, her worth. But sitting in Dr. Martinez's office today, being treated with kindness and respect, had shown Maya a different version of herself, one that might be capable of more than Linda believed. "Maybe you're wrong," Maya said, the words slipping out before she could stop them.
The silence that followed was electric. Linda stopped pacing, her entire body going rigid. Maya could see the anger building in her mother's face, the familiar progression from irritation to rage that Maya had witnessed countless times, but never been brave enough to challenge. "What did you say?" Linda asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Maya's instinct was to apologize, to backtrack, to restore the careful balance that kept their household functioning. But something about the day, about Dr. Martinez's kindness, about the possibility of escape that college represented, about the knowledge that someone would soon be asking questions, made her hold her ground. "I said, maybe you're wrong," Maya repeated, her voice shaking but determined. "Maybe I am college material. Maybe I could become an engineer." Maya moved closer, invading Maya's personal space in that particular way she had when she wanted to intimidate. Maya could smell her mother's perfume, the same floral scent she'd worn for years, now forever associated in Maya's mind with conflict and control. "You ungrateful little bitch," Linda hissed. "After everything I've done for you, after all the sacrifices I've made, this is how you repay me? By telling me I'm wrong?" Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The rational part of her mind was screaming at her to apologize, to de-escalate before things went too far. But another part, a part that had been growing stronger since her grandmother's death, refused to back down. "I'm grateful for everything you've done," Maya said, standing up from the sofa so she could face Linda at eye level. "Your dreams?" Linda laughed harshly. "Maya, you don't get to have dreams. You have responsibilities. You have obligations to the person who raised you." Maya tried to pull her arm free, but Linda's grip tightened. They stood there for a moment, locked in a tableau that felt both familiar and completely foreign. Maya could see her reflection in the black television screen, a young woman being held against her will by someone who claimed to love her. "Let go," Maya said quietly. "Not until you understand something," Linda replied. "You belong to me. I created you. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. You don't get to just walk away because you think you're better than this life." Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The rational part of her mind was screaming at her to apologize, to de-escalate before things went too far. But another part, a part that had been growing stronger since her grandmother's death, refused to back down. "I'm grateful for everything you've done," she said, standing up from the sofa so she could face Linda at eye level. "Your dreams?" Linda laughed harshly. "Maya, you don't get to have dreams. You have responsibilities. You have obligations to the person who raised you." Maya tried to pull her arm free, but Linda's grip tightened. They stood there for a moment, locked in a tableau that felt both familiar and completely foreign. Maya could see her reflection in the black television screen, a young woman being held against her will by someone who claimed to love her. "Let go," Maya said quietly. "Not until you understand something," Linda replied. "You belong to me. I created you. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. You don't get to just walk away because you think you're better than this life." Maya felt tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall.
Crying would give Linda what she wanted, evidence of Maya's weakness, proof of her inability to handle the real world. Instead, Maya met her mother's gaze directly. I don't belong to anyone. I'm not your property. Linda's grip on her arm became painful, fingers digging into the soft flesh with deliberate pressure. You are what I made you, she said. Nothing more, nothing less. And I didn't make you to abandon me. Maya could feel bruises forming under Linda's fingers, could see the cold calculation in her mother's eyes. This wasn't anger anymore. This was something more systematic, more intentional. Maya had crossed a line she hadn't even known existed, and Linda was making sure she understood the consequences. "Mom, you're hurting me," Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. "Good. Maybe now you'll remember your place." She released Maya's arm with a little shove, sending Maya stumbling backward onto the sofa. Maya rubbed the tender spots where Linda's fingers had been, already feeling the soreness that would bloom into purple marks by morning.
Miguel leaned forward, his nervousness evaporating as he entered territory where passion trumped protocol. Quality, attention to detail, the willingness to do things right rather than fast. Most restoration shops are focused on volume, on getting cars in and out as quickly as possible. I want to create something different, a place where every restoration is treated like a work of art, where the goal isn't just to make old cars run, but to make them sing. He showed her examples of his work, photographs of cars he'd restored as side projects over the years. A 1969 Camaro that had been rust and regret when its owner brought it to him, transformed into gleaming muscle that looked better than the day it rolled off the assembly line. A 1955 Thunderbird that had been sitting in a barn for 30 years, now purring with the satisfaction of resurrection. Each photo told a story of transformation, of machines given new life through patience and skill, and an almost religious devotion to craft. "These are impressive," Catherine said, studying the photographs with the careful attention of someone who understood value. "But restoration is labor-intensive work. How do you scale craftsmanship without compromising quality?" It was the question Miguel had been wrestling with for 3 years, the central challenge of turning artistic passion into sustainable business. You don't scale the craftsmanship, you scale the appreciation for it. Start with a small number of high-end restorations, build a reputation for excellence, let satisfied customers become your marketing department. Word of mouth in the classic car community travels fast, and collectors are willing to pay premium prices for work they trust. Catherine nodded, making notes in a leather portfolio that probably cost more than Miguel's monthly rent. "And your financial projections? How confident are you in these numbers?" Miguel had spent countless hours researching comparable businesses, analyzing market rates, calculating costs down to the penny. His projections were conservative, based on worst-case scenarios and unexpected expenses. But sitting in this conference room, surrounded by the trappings of serious wealth, his careful calculations felt naive and optimistic. "His numbers are solid," he said, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I've researched every aspect of the business, from equipment costs to insurance requirements to marketing budgets. The $50,000 would cover startup costs, initial inventory, shop improvements, and 6 months of operating expenses." "And if the business fails?" Catherine asked, her voice carrying no judgment, just the practical concern of someone who'd seen dreams crumble under the weight of reality. Miguel felt the question like a physical blow. It was the fear that kept him awake at night, the possibility that haunted every optimistic projection. "Then I'll have failed trying rather than succeeded at settling," he said finally. "My daughter will know that her father believed in something strongly enough to risk everything for it. And I'll know that I honored my father's memory by reaching for the dreams he never had the chance to pursue." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, her fingers steepled as she considered his words. Outside the conference room windows, the city continued its relentless pursuit of progress, unaware that one man's future hung in the balance 35 floors above the streets where dreams were made and broken with equal indifference. "Miguel," Catherine said finally, her voice carrying a weight that made his stomach clench, I have to be honest with you. Your application presents some significant challenges from a traditional lending perspective. Miguel felt the world tilt sideways, his careful hopes beginning to crumble like castles built on sand. This was it, the rejection he'd been expecting, delivered with professional courtesy but devastating finality. Your credit history shows some late payments, Catherine continued, consulting a file that seemed to contain every financial mistake he'd ever made. Your collateral is limited. Your business experience is primarily as an employee rather than an owner. From a pure risk assessment standpoint, this loan represents a significant exposure for the bank. Miguel nodded, trying to maintain dignity even as his dreams dissolved around him. I understand. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me personally. But, Catherine said, and that single word carried the weight of possibility. There are other factors to consider beyond traditional metrics. Miguel looked up, afraid to hope but unable to stop himself. 2 weeks ago, a woman broke down in the rain and found herself at the mercy of a stranger's integrity. That stranger could have charged her double his normal rate, knowing she was desperate and had no alternatives. Instead, he charged a fair price and treated her with the same honesty he would show any customer. That tells me something about character that doesn't show up in credit reports. Miguel's throat was so tight he could barely speak. Mrs. Pinnacle, Catherine, please, and let me finish. She leaned forward, her executive composure giving way to something more personal. I've been in banking for 30 years, Miguel. I've seen hundreds of business plans, approved thousands of loans, watched countless entrepreneurs succeed and fail. The successful ones all had one thing in common. They understood that business is ultimately about people, about trust, about doing what you say you're going to do, even when no one is watching.
Was from her friend Jessica, a girl from high school who had gone away to college and now lived in what seemed like a different universe. Hey girl, how's community college applications going? Can't wait to catch up soon. Maya stared at the message, realizing that Jessica didn't even know about the state university scholarship. Maya had been too afraid to tell anyone about it, too worried that talking about her dreams would somehow jinx them or invite Linda's anger. Now the opportunity was slipping away, day by day, as enrollment deadlines approached, and Maya remained paralyzed by fear and obligation. She typed back, still figuring things out. How's school? Jessica's response came quickly. Amazing. Hard, but amazing. Living in the dorms is the best thing ever. Total freedom. You're going to love it. Maya felt a sharp pang of longing so intense it was almost physical. Total freedom. The concept seemed as foreign as space travel, as impossible as breathing underwater. Maya had never lived anywhere but this apartment, had never made a decision without considering Linda's reaction, had never experienced the simple pleasure of coming and going as she pleased. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Jessica. BTW, saw your mom at the grocery store last week. She seems stressed. Everything okay at home? Maya's blood chilled. Linda had always been careful to present a perfect facade to the outside world. The devoted single mother, the hard worker, the woman who had overcome adversity to raise a successful daughter. If Jessica had noticed stress, if cracks were showing in Linda's public persona, what did that mean for Maya's safety at home? She decided not to respond to Jessica's question. What could she say? That her mother had just grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises? That she was afraid to pursue her dreams because it might trigger another accident? That she spent most of her time walking on eggshells, trying to predict and prevent Linda's anger? Instead, Maya put her phone aside and tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dr. Martinez's concerned face, heard her saying, Maya, I think someone hurt you, and I think you've been protecting them. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Maya's mood, as she prepared for another day of pretending everything was normal.
She chose her clothes carefully, a long-sleeved shirt that would cover the bruises on her arm, comfortable shoes for her part-time job at the campus bookstore, layers that would hide the way she still couldn't stand up straight. Linda was already gone when Maya emerged from her bedroom. A note on the kitchen counter reminded Maya to pick up groceries after work, written in Linda's precise handwriting that somehow managed to convey criticism, even in grocery lists. Maya made herself toast and coffee, moving carefully around the kitchen where everything had changed 3 months ago. The campus bookstore was only a 15-minute drive from the apartment, but it felt like traveling to another planet. The community college where Maya worked part-time was nothing like the university she dreamed of attending, but it still represented possibility in a way that made her chest tight with longing. Students her age walked across the quad with purpose and independence, carrying backpacks full of textbooks, discussing assignments and professors and weekend plans. Maya's job was simple: checking inventory, helping students find textbooks, operating the cash register during busy periods. She'd been working there for 6 months, saving money that she had originally planned to use for college expenses. Now that money sat in a bank account she was afraid to touch. Another dream deferred indefinitely. "Maya," her supervisor Mrs. Patterson greeted her with characteristic enthusiasm. "How's the back feeling today?" Maya had told Mrs. Patterson about her injury in general terms, explaining her frequent wincing and careful movements as the result of a household accident. Mrs. Patterson was a kind woman in her 50s who treated the student employees like her own children, always asking about their classes and future plans.
Better, Maya lied, arranging her face into what she hoped was a convincing smile. Still a little sore, but improving. Good to hear. We've got a big shipment coming in today. Nothing too heavy for you to handle, but let me know if you need help with anything. Maya nodded and got to work, grateful for the routine tasks that kept her mind occupied. She shelved textbooks, updated inventory spreadsheets, and helped students navigate the sometimes confusing world of required course materials. It was peaceful work, the kind of simple productivity that made her feel useful and competent. Around noon, during her lunch break, Maya's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and for a moment she considered letting it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Hello, is this Maya Chen?" The voice was female, professional but warm. "My name is Sarah Williams, and I'm a social worker with the County Family Services Department. I was hoping we could set up a time to talk." Maya's mouth dried. This was it. The phone call Dr. Martinez had warned her about, the beginning of whatever process would unfold from her medical report. Maya looked around the bookstore, grateful that she was alone in the back office where no one could overhear. Okay, Maya managed. What do you want to talk about?" "I received a report from a healthcare provider regarding some concerns about your safety and well-being," Sarah explained gently. "I'd like to meet with you to discuss the situation and make sure you have access to all available resources." Maya's hands were shaking as she gripped the phone. "Am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong?" "Not at all," Sarah assured her quickly. "You're not in trouble, Maya. This is about making sure you're safe and supported. Would you be available to meet sometime today or tomorrow?" Maya thought about her schedule, about Linda's expectations, about the careful routine that kept their household functioning. Meeting with a social worker felt like stepping off a cliff. Once she took that step, there would be no going back to the fragile stability she'd known. "I work until 5 today, and tomorrow I'm supposed to be home. We could meet after your work today if that's convenient. Do you know the coffee shop called The Daily Grind on Elm Street? It's a neutral territory, comfortable for conversation." Maya knew the place. She'd driven past it countless times, had always wanted to stop in, but never felt like she had the freedom to make spontaneous decisions like grabbing coffee. The idea of meeting there, of sitting across from a stranger and talking about her life, felt both terrifying and oddly liberating.
Okay, Maya said. What time? How about 5:30? That gives you time to finish work and drive over. Okay, Maya repeated, though nothing about this felt okay. How will I recognize you? I'll be wearing a blue cardigan and carrying a leather portfolio. And Maya, you're doing the right thing by talking to me. I know this feels overwhelming, but you're not alone. After she hung up, Maya sat in the quiet of the bookstore office, trying to process what had just happened. In 6 hours, she would be sitting across from a social worker, discussing her mother's behavior, potentially setting in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Part of her wanted to call back and cancel, to retreat to the familiar territory of silence and secrecy. But another part, the part that was tired of walking on eggshells and managing Linda's emotions and pretending that fear was normal, wanted to see what lay on the other side of honesty.
There, Miguel said finally, closing the hood with satisfaction. She should run like new. The alternator I installed is actually more reliable than the original. Sometimes the aftermarket parts are built better than what comes from the factory. Catherine slid behind the wheel, and the Mercedes came to life with the smooth purr of German engineering at its finest. The dashboard remained dark. No warning lights, no signs of distress. Miguel had performed his small miracle, bringing order back to chaos, function back to failure. "How much do I owe you?" Catherine asked, reaching for a purse that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Miguel calculated parts and labor, adding his standard markup, but nothing more, despite the obvious wealth of his customer. $240, he said. Catherine handed him $300 bills without hesitation. "Keep the change. And thank you. Not just for the repair, but for the conversation. It's rare to meet someone who talks about their work with such passion." As she prepared to leave, Catherine paused, her hand on the door handle. "Miguel, this business plan of yours, this Santos custom restoration, do you have it written down? Don't forget to hit that like button if you're rooting for Miguel's dreams to come true. Share this story with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe so you never miss these incredible real-life transformations." Miguel nodded, wondering where this was leading. Every detail: market analysis, financial projections, equipment needs, target customer base. I've been working on it for 3 years. And you need funding to make it happen? $50,000 would cover everything: equipment, initial inventory, shop improvements, operating capital for the first 6 months. The words tumbled out before Miguel could stop them, and he immediately felt foolish. Why was he telling a stranger his financial needs? Catherine smiled, an expression that seemed to hold secrets and possibilities. "Well, Miguel Santos, I have a feeling we might be speaking again very soon. Thank you for restoring my faith in honest mechanics and in the American dream." She drove away into the storm, the Mercedes disappearing into the gray afternoon like a silver ghost, leaving Miguel standing in the doorway of his humble shop with $300 in his hand and a strange sense that something significant had just occurred. He didn't know it yet, but the woman who'd walked into his life seeking automotive help was Catherine Pinnacle, president and CEO of Pinnacle National Bank, the same bank where his loan application waited like a sleeping dragon that could either grant his wishes or incinerate his dreams. The rain continued to fall, but for the first time in weeks, Miguel Santos allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the storm was finally beginning to pass. The $300 helped with immediate bills, but Miguel was soon back to his familiar financial struggles. Sophia's homework lay scattered across the kitchen table of their small apartment above the shop, math problems that seemed to mock him with their clean certainty, numbers that added up perfectly, unlike the chaotic arithmetic of his life, where expenses always exceeded income, where dreams cost more than reality could afford. His 12-year-old daughter worked with the focused intensity she'd inherited from him, her dark hair falling across her face as she bent over equations that had clear solutions, unlike the problems that kept her father awake at night. "Papa, can you help me with this one?" Sophia asked, pointing to a word problem about compound interest that made Miguel's chest tighten. The irony wasn't lost on him, his daughter learning about how money could grow, while he struggled to keep any money from disappearing entirely. Miguel slid into the chair beside her, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo, a small luxury he refused to sacrifice, even when the bills mounted higher than his hope. "Let's see. If someone invests $500 at 6% interest, compounded annually," he worked through the problem with her, showing her how money could multiply over time, how patience and consistency could build wealth from modest beginnings. The lesson felt like swallowing glass.
Maya felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening that she hadn't known was closed. Hearing her experiences labeled so clearly, so definitively, was both validating and terrifying. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't being overly sensitive. Her fear was justified. "What happens now?" Maya asked. "That depends on what you want to happen," Sarah replied. "We have several options available to us. We could arrange for you to stay somewhere safe while we investigate the situation further. We could help you develop a safety plan for remaining at home while you work toward independence. We could connect you with counseling services, legal advocacy, educational support." The list of possibilities seemed overwhelming. Maya had lived for so long within Linda's narrow framework that the idea of having options felt almost paralyzing. "I don't know what I want," Maya admitted. "I'm scared of making things worse." "That's completely understandable," Sarah assured her. "These are big decisions, and you don't have to make them right now. But Maya, I want you to understand something important. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. You deserve to pursue your dreams without fear of retaliation. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness." Maya felt tears building behind her eyes, but this time she didn't fight them. Sitting in this coffee shop, talking to this woman who saw her pain and validated her experiences, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. They exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet again in 2 days. Sarah gave Maya several pamphlets about domestic violence resources and a small card with crisis numbers she could call anytime, day or night. "Maya," Sarah said as they prepared to leave, "I want you to know that reaching out was incredibly brave. A lot of people never take that step." Maya drove home in a daze, the pamphlets hidden in her purse alongside Dr. Martinez's crisis card. She felt like she was carrying explosives, dangerous information that could shatter the careful equilibrium of her life. But she also felt something else, something she was almost afraid to name: the possibility of freedom. Linda was waiting when Maya arrived home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and an expression that immediately put Maya on alert. "You're late," Linda said. Maya glanced at the clock. It was 7:15. She was 45 minutes later than usual, but she'd never had a specific curfew. Still, she could see the anger simmering in Linda's eyes, the familiar signs that an argument was brewing. "I stopped for gas," Maya lied, hanging her purse carefully on its hook by the door. "And there was traffic." Linda studied her face with the intensity of someone trained to detect deception. "You look different. Flushed. Excited about something." Maya's heart rate quickened. Had Sarah's validation and support changed something visible in her demeanor? Was she somehow radiating the hope and possibility she'd felt at the coffee shop? "I'm just tired," Maya said. "It was a long day at work." Linda stood from the table and moved closer, invading Maya's personal space in that particular way she had when she wanted to intimidate. Maya could smell her mother's familiar perfume, see the calculation in her dark eyes. "Maya, you know I love you, don't you?" The question should have been comforting, but coming from Linda, it felt like a trap. Maya had learned that Linda's declarations of love usually preceded demands for compliance or guilt-inducing lectures about sacrifice and obligation. "Yes, Mom," Maya replied automatically. Good, Linda said, reaching out to touch Maya's arm, the same arm she'd bruised the night before. Maya flinched involuntarily, and Linda's eyes sharpened with interest. Because sometimes I worry that you don't appreciate everything I do for you. Sometimes I worry that you're planning to leave me, just like your father did. Maya felt the familiar weight of guilt settling on her shoulders like a heavy coat. This was Linda's most effective weapon, the reminder of past abandonment, the suggestion that Maya's desire for independence was a form of betrayal. "I'm not planning to leave you," Maya said, though even as she spoke the words, she could feel their falseness. Wasn't that exactly what she was planning? Wasn't that what the college scholarship represented? What her conversations with Dr. Martinez and Sarah were leading toward? "I hope not," Linda said, her grip tightening slightly on Maya's arm. "Because if you did leave me, Maya, I don't know what I would do. I might not be able to go on." The threat was subtle but clear. Linda had used variations of this manipulation for years, suggesting that Maya's independence would lead to Linda's destruction. It was emotional blackmail dressed up as vulnerable confession, and Maya had fallen for it countless times. But tonight, with Sarah's words still echoing in her mind, Maya recognized the manipulation for what it was. "You deserve to pursue your dreams without fear of retaliation," Sarah had said. "You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness." "Mom," said carefully, "you're hurting my arm." Linda looked down at her hand as if surprised to find it gripping Maya's arm. She released her hold, but didn't step back, maintaining the uncomfortable closeness that made Maya feel trapped. "I'm sorry," Linda said, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "I just get worried about you, about us. We're all each other has, Maya. We have to stick together." Maya nodded, playing the role of the compliant daughter, while her mind raced with new possibilities. Tomorrow, she would call Sarah and tell her about this conversation. Tomorrow, she would start planning for a future that might not include managing Linda's emotions, or walking on eggshells, or sacrificing her dreams for someone else's fears. Tonight, though, she would survive. She would smile and agree and pretend that love was supposed to feel like a cage. But for the first time in her 19 years, Maya was beginning to understand the difference between love and control. Maya's carefully constructed world began to fracture 2 days later, starting with a phone call that arrived while Linda was at work. Maya had taken a sick day from the bookstore. Her back was genuinely hurting, but more than that, she needed time to think, to process everything that had happened in her meeting with Sarah. She was lying on her bed staring at the college brochures she'd hidden under her mattress when her phone rang. The caller ID showed the State University admissions office, and Maya's heart leapt into her throat. "Hello, is this Maya Chen? This is Jennifer from State University Admissions. I'm calling to follow up on your scholarship acceptance. We haven't received your enrollment confirmation yet, and our deadline is next week." Maya sat up too quickly, sending a sharp pain through her injured back. She'd been so consumed with the immediate crisis of her home situation that she'd let the scholarship deadline slip toward disaster. Yes, this is Maya. I'm sorry, I've been dealing with some family issues." "Of course, I understand. These are big decisions. But Maya, I want you to know that this is an exceptional opportunity. Full tuition, room and board, plus a stipend for books and supplies. We don't offer many scholarships like this."
Maya closed her eyes, trying to imagine herself in a dormitory room, studying engineering, building the kind of life she'd only dreamed about. But the fantasy felt impossible when weighed against the reality of Linda's expectations and her own fear of the consequences. "I need a little more time," Maya said. "Would it be possible to get an extension?" "I can give you until Friday," Jennifer replied. "But Maya, after that, we'll have to offer the scholarship to someone else. I hope you'll seriously consider accepting. Your application essays were remarkable. You have a real gift for expressing your passion for engineering." After the call ended, Maya sat in the silence of her room, surrounded by the debris of dreams she was too afraid to pursue. The scholarship papers were spread across her bed like an accusation, reminding her of the future she was letting slip away out of fear and obligation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How are you doing? Ready for our meeting tomorrow?" Maya stared at the message, struck by the contrast between Sarah's supportive concern and the isolation she felt at home. Yesterday's conversation with Linda had left her more convinced than ever that her mother's love came with strings attached, thick, unbreakable chains that bound Maya to a life of careful compliance. She typed back, "Yes, I need to tell you about some things that happened." The response came quickly. "Of course. Remember, you can call me anytime if you feel unsafe." Unsafe. The word had become Maya's constant companion over the past week, a lens through which she was learning to view interactions she'd previously normalized. Linda's grip on her arm hadn't been affectionate concern. It had been a demonstration of control. Her threats about not being able to go on if Maya left weren't expressions of love. They were emotional manipulation designed to keep Maya trapped. Maya spent the morning researching domestic violence resources online, reading articles and testimonials that made her feel less alone and more terrified in equal measure. The patterns were so clear when applied to other people's stories, so obvious when the victims were strangers rather than herself. Around noon, her phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Dr. Martinez's office. "Maya, how are you feeling?" Dr. Martinez's warm voice was like a lifeline. "I wanted to follow up on our appointment and see if you'd been able to connect with the resources I mentioned. I met with Sarah Williams yesterday, the social worker you contacted." "Good. I'm so glad. How did that go?" Maya found herself telling Dr. Martinez about the conversation, about finally putting words to experiences she'd never articulated before. The chiropractor listened without judgment, offering gentle encouragement and professional insight. "Maya, you should know that your x-rays have been weighing on my mind. The pattern of injury you sustained, it's not consistent with a simple fall. The force required to cause that kind of damage would have had to be significant and precisely applied." Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that someone hurt you deliberately, Maya, and I'm worried about what might happen if you continue living in that environment." The conversation lasted another 10 minutes, with Dr. Martinez explaining the medical evidence that supported her concerns and encouraging Maya to prioritize her safety above all else. After they hung up, Maya sat in the quiet of her room, feeling the weight of professional validation settling over her like a blanket. 2 healthcare professionals now believed her story. A social worker had labeled her experiences as abuse. The evidence was mounting, creating a foundation of truth that Linda couldn't manipulate or explain away.
Maya was still sitting on her bed, surrounded by college brochures and crisis pamphlets, when she heard Linda's key in the front door. It was only 2 o'clock. Linda wasn't supposed to be home for hours. Maya quickly gathered the papers and shoved them back under her mattress, her heart racing with the automatic fear response that had become second nature. "Maya?" Linda's voice cut through the apartment with unusual sharpness. "Where are you?" Maya emerged from her bedroom to find Linda standing in the living room, still wearing her work clothes, but with an expression that immediately put Maya on high alert. Linda's face was flushed, her hair slightly disheveled, and her eyes held a dangerous brightness that Maya had learned to fear. "Mom, what are you doing home so early?" "I got a very interesting phone call at work today from someone claiming to be a social worker." Maya's blood turned to ice.
Sarah had promised confidentiality, had assured Maya that their conversations wouldn't be shared without permission. But maybe Linda had somehow found out anyway, or maybe there were mandatory reporting requirements Maya didn't understand. "I don't know what you mean," Maya said, though the lie felt transparent even to her own ears. Linda moved closer, her movements predatory and controlled. "Don't lie to me, Maya. Someone called my office asking questions about you, about our home situation. They wanted to schedule a visit to assess your safety and well-being." Maya's mind raced, trying to process this information. Had Sarah broken her promise about confidentiality? Or was this part of some official process that Maya hadn't been prepared for? "They said they had received reports of domestic violence," Linda continued, her voice rising slightly. "Can you imagine someone suggesting that I, your mother, the person who has sacrificed everything for you, would hurt you?" Maya backed toward the wall, her body instinctively seeking escape routes, even as her mind struggled to find the right response. Linda's anger was different today, more focused, more dangerous than the general irritation that usually characterized their arguments. "Mom, you called them," Linda said, the accusation hanging in the air like a blade. "You told strangers that I abuse you." "I didn't. Don't you dare lie to me, Maya." Linda's voice exploded through the apartment with a force that Maya flinched. "I know you, Maya. I know when you're lying. You've been acting strange all week, secretive, defiant, and now this." Maya pressed herself against the wall, feeling trapped in a space that had never felt like home, but had at least felt predictable. This was new territory, uncharted waters where the rules of engagement had shifted dramatically. "Mom, I went to a doctor," Maya said quietly, "for my back. She was concerned about my injuries." "Concerned about your injuries?" Linda laughed harshly. "You fell down some stairs, Maya. Accidents happen. But instead of accepting that, you've created this elaborate fantasy about being a victim." "It wasn't an accident," Maya said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "You pushed me." The silence that followed was electric, charged with years of unspoken truths finally given voice. Linda's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. "I never pushed you," Linda said, dropping her voice to a dangerous whisper. "You fell. You were clumsy and careless, and you fell."
But Maya had spent too many hours this week examining her experiences through new lenses, had received too much validation from too many professionals to let Linda rewrite history so easily. "You pushed me because you were angry about the college scholarship," Maya said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "You didn't want me to leave, so you tried to scare me into staying." Linda's hand shot out before Maya could react, striking her across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. The sound echoed through the apartment like a gunshot, and Maya tasted blood where her teeth had cut her lip. For a moment, they both stood frozen, as if the physical blow had surprised Linda as much as it had hurt Maya. Maya raised her hand to her stinging cheek, feeling the heat radiating from the point of impact. "Now you have something real to report," Linda said, her voice eerily calm. "But you won't, will you, Maya? Because you know what will happen if you do." Maya looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw something she'd been too afraid to acknowledge before. This wasn't a woman overwhelmed by stress or struggling with anger management issues. This was someone who used violence as a tool of control, who calculated the precise amount of force needed to maintain dominance without attracting outside attention. "What will happen?" Maya asked, surprised by her own boldness. Linda smiled, and the expression was more frightening than her anger had been. "If you involve outsiders in our business, Maya, you'll find out just how much worse things can get. You think you're suffering now? You have no idea what real suffering looks like."
The threat hung in the air between them, explicit and unmistakable. Maya felt something crystallize in her mind, a moment of perfect clarity that cut through years of confusion and self-doubt. This wasn't love. This was not normal family conflict. This was abuse, systematic and deliberate, designed to keep Maya small and compliant and afraid. "I'm leaving," Maya said, the words emerging from somewhere deep inside her that she'd never accessed before. Linda's expression shifted again, the calculated calmness giving way to something more desperate. "No, you're not. You have nowhere to go, no money, no skills. You think the world is going to welcome you with open arms? You're nothing without me, Maya, nothing." But Maya was already moving, walking toward her bedroom with purpose that felt foreign and powerful. Behind her, she could hear Linda following, her voice rising with increasing panic. "Maya, don't you walk away from me." Maya began pulling clothes from her dresser, stuffing them into the duffel bag that she'd used for overnight trips to her grandmother's house. Her movements were automatic, driven by adrenaline and the sudden, overwhelming need to escape before Linda's violence escalated further. "Where do you think you're going?" Linda demanded, standing in the doorway. "You can't survive on your own. You'll come crawling back within a week." Maya ignored her, focusing on gathering the essentials: clothes, toiletries, the few personal items that held meaning for her. She found the college scholarship papers under her mattress and shoved them into her bag alongside everything else. "Maya, stop this nonsense right now," Linda said, her tone shifting to the fake sweetness she used when she wanted to manipulate. "You're being dramatic. We can work this out. We always work things out."
Guilt is going to be your biggest challenge, Dr. Sanchez explained during one of their early sessions. You've been trained to feel responsible for your mother's emotional well-being. Breaking that conditioning takes time and practice. Maya's phone continued to receive messages from various family members, all with variations on the same theme. Linda was suffering, Maya was being selfish, she needed to come home and repair the relationship. But with each message, Maya felt less compelled to respond. She was building a life that didn't revolve around managing Linda's crises, and the contrast was stark enough to make her old reality seem almost surreal. 1 month into the semester, Maya received an email that made her heart stop. "Maya, this is your mother. I know you've been ignoring my family's messages, but I need you to know that I'm getting help. I've started therapy, and I understand now how I hurt you. I want to make things right between us. Please give me a chance to show me that I can change." Maya stared at the email for a long time, feeling the familiar tug of hope and obligation that Linda's promises always triggered. This was what Maya had always wanted to hear: acknowledgement, accountability, the possibility of a healthy relationship with her mother. She forwarded the email to Dr. Sanchez and Sarah, asking for their perspectives. Dr. Sanchez's response was measured but cautious. This could be genuine, but it could also be a more sophisticated form of manipulation. The fact that she's reaching out directly after you've been clear about needing space is concerning. Take your time deciding how to respond. Sarah was more direct. "Maya, people can change, but it usually takes years of consistent therapy and behavior modification. Don't let hope override your safety instincts." Maya spent a week thinking about the email, discussing it in therapy, talking it through with her new friends who had become surprisingly good listeners and advisors. Finally, she decided to respond, but on her own terms. "Mom," she wrote, "I'm glad you're getting help. If you're genuinely committed to changing, then keep going to therapy for yourself, not to get me back. If you're still in therapy in a year and can show consistent changes in how you treat people, maybe we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. Until then, I need space to heal and build my own life." She sent the email and then blocked Linda's email address. It felt both cruel and necessary, a boundary that prioritized Maya's well-being over Linda's immediate desires.
Maya stood at the podium in the engineering building's main lecture hall, looking out at an audience of incoming first-year students and their families. As a junior now, she'd been asked to speak at the orientation for students in the engineering learning community, a testament to how far she had come from the frightened 19-year-old who had once thought college was an impossible dream. 2 years ago, she began, I stood where you're sitting now, convinced that I didn't belong here. I'd never lived away from home, never made a major decision without someone else's approval, never believed that I was capable of the kind of independent thinking that engineering requires. She paused, making eye contact with nervous-looking students in the front rows, remembering her own terror at sitting in that same auditorium for the first time. What I've learned since then is that engineering isn't just about solving technical problems. It's about believing that problems can be solved, that complex systems can be understood and improved, that you have the ability to make things better than they were. Maya had maintained a 3.8 GPA throughout her first 2 years, earning recognition on the dean's list and landing a coveted internship with a structural engineering firm for the upcoming summer. But more than her academic success, she was proud of her life she had built. Friendships with classmates who valued her ideas, involvement in organizations that challenged her to grow, relationships with professors who had become mentors and advocates.
She'd heard from Linda only once since their email exchange. A brief message 6 months ago announcing that Linda was still in therapy and working on becoming the mother Maya deserved. Maya had appreciated the update, but hadn't responded. She wasn't ready for direct contact, might never be ready, and she'd learned that protecting her own well-being wasn't selfish or cruel. The most important thing I want you to understand, Maya continued, addressing the incoming students, is that you have the right to pursue your dreams, even if the people who claim to love you don't understand or support those dreams. You have the right to build a life that makes you happy, even if it means disappointing people who want you to stay small. After her speech, Maya was approached by several students with questions about academic strategies and campus resources. But one conversation stood out. A quiet girl who lingered after the others had left. "I wanted to thank you," the girl said, her voice barely audible, "for what you said about having the right to pursue your dreams. I almost didn't come to college because my family, they don't think I should be here." Maya saw something familiar in the girl's expression, the fear and hope and desperate longing for permission to want more than what she'd been told she deserved. "What's your name?" Maya asked. "Elena? Elena, can I give you some advice?" The girl nodded eagerly. "Find your people here. Find the professors who believe in you, the classmates who support your goals, the staff members who want to see you succeed. Build a community that sees your potential instead of your limitations. And remember that you don't need anyone's permission to be extraordinary." Maya gave Elena her contact information and offered to introduce her to the various support systems that had been crucial to Maya's own success. As she watched the girl walk away with a little more confidence in her stride, Maya felt the deep satisfaction that came from turning her own survival into something that could help others. That evening, Maya sat in her apartment, a small but comfortable place she shared with Priya, who had become her closest friend, and reflected on the distance she'd traveled, not just the physical distance from Linda's apartment to her current life, but the emotional and psychological journey from victim to survivor, to someone who could help others navigate similar challenges. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, who had become not just a social worker, but a mentor and friend. "Saw the video of your speech online. Your grandmother would be so proud." Maya smiled, thinking about her grandmother's silver bracelet, which she still wore every day. "Be brave, little bird. Don't let anyone clip your wings." She had learned to fly not just despite the attempts to clip her wings, but because her determination to prove that she deserved the sky.
As she prepared for bed, Maya looked out her window at the campus where she'd built a new life from nothing but determination and the kindness of strangers who had believed in her potential. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, engineering problems to solve, relationships to navigate, dreams to pursue. But Maya faced the future with confidence, born of surviving the impossible and discovering her own strength. She had broken the cycle of abuse that had defined her childhood, had chosen education over obligation, and had transformed herself from someone who absorbed others' anger into someone who created solutions. Maya Chen was no longer the frightened girl who had left her mother's apartment with nothing but a duffel bag and a heart full of hope. She was an engineer, a survivor, a young woman who had learned that the most important structures she would ever design were the boundaries that protected her dreams and the foundation that supported her authentic self. And she was free.